You've probably heard a lot of people around here talk about not eating highly processed foods, but have you ever wondered what constitutes a highly processed food? Let's get into it. All right, so the thing to know is that a lot of foods are processed. For example, you aren't going to just like take rice and eat it straight from the plant. It has to be processed to some extent, right? In order for it to get into a bag onto the grocery store shelf and for you to eat, even if it's brown rice, still processed. A food like ground beef, that is a processed food. It has to go through a process to take it from its original state into ground meat. So, right, like can get confusing because we do eat processed foods and there's not necessarily something wrong with foods that are processed, but foods that are highly processed tend to be really problematic and tend to cause a lot of issues and contribute to a lot of issues, especially for women dealing with hormone imbalances, symptoms like fatigue, symptoms like moodiness, symptoms like painful periods, symptoms like dysregulated cycle. If you have any kind of health conditions like a thyroid condition, like PCOS, like endometriosis, right? You're going to want to pay attention to highly processed foods in your diet, okay? So highly processed foods are going to be things that not only are processed from their original state, like that example of like a whole cow being processed, part of it into ground beef, but things that are truly highly processed. So things like that have corn syrup in them. That's going through a lot of processes, right? It's not just a simple process of like, oh, we grind up corn and it becomes corn syrup. There's actually a lot of chemicals involved to get it to that. But not only that, it's in a food that then gets packaged with a lot of other things that are very processed, right? So we see things like corn syrup in things like cereal and things like baked goods and things like candy, right? But not only that, y'all, I am seeing a real trend where women are eating a lot of highly processed health foods, things like protein bars. I cannot say enough about how things like Quest bars are not health foods. Those are not health foods. That is a highly processed food. It is very similar to a candy bar when you really look at what's in it and think about how much processing has gone into each ingredient and then to process that into that bar, okay? So that's going to be an example of like a highly processed food. Essentially, the more ingredients something has, right, the more those individual ingredients are processed in order to make that component that's an ingredient, the more it's a processed food. Highly processed foods often contain a good amount of fats and a good amount of sugars. So that's something that you can look out for. But in general, when we're talking about highly processed foods, a really easy way to stay away from these foods is to simply eat whole, less processed foods. So things like you're going to get from the perimeter of the grocery store, right? Simple things that if it comes in a package, it is one ingredient, like that example of rice. If you get a bag of rice and you see just ingredients, rice. Simple, right? Things that are like produce. You're going to go get apples. You're going to go get broccoli, right? These are going to be less processed foods. And that's what we want the bulk of our diet to be comprised of when we have, frankly, any goals related to health. I really am sick of people on here talking about how, you know, you can do something like follow an if it fits your macros approach, right? And that is going to be good for you because you're going to see things like the scale change. Health is about so much more than what's happening on the scale. And that's really what I'm interested in and what my clients are interested in and what we focus on inside of my membership, the Balanced Hormone membership.